Okay, so we're talking about what is justice and what does it have to do with marketing, and you all were up there, right? It's last, so why don't you go back up there and sort of refresh us on what you had said were your answers? I think I wrote down some of it. Okay, so group infinite, right?
Yeah.
All right, so you said moral standards for what's right or wrong, policies, and yours examples were Dick's Sporting Goods, removal of rifles from their stores after a number of shootings, right? They decided they were going to do that. No, did they remove all of their?
I think it was assault rifles.
Just assault rifles, okay. Should they removed every gun?
Because that's what they thought was ethically right to do at the moment.
Okay. Is responding to, so one of the things I did remember that I wrote down as I'm looking at my notes here, is there a difference between most preferred and preferred by most?
Yeah, I'd say so.
There's a difference between most preferred and preferred. What's the difference?
Well, the most preferred would be like within the company, and preferred by most would probably be the customers.
Okay. All right. So businesses responding to incidents like shootings, I think the one that actually led to Dick's pulling the assault rifles was the shooting in the El Paso. Was it?
It was the Parkland one.
The Parkland. Okay. Is that just responding to what's preferred by most as opposed to what's most preferred?
I say preferred by, well, yeah, preferred by most.
You think it's preferred by most?
Well, did you say that it was all Dick's Sporting Goods?
Yeah, like the whole company removed it from all their stores.
Okay. All right. Your second example was Target, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And what was the Target one?
They gave all their employees an active shooter training.
Okay, active shooter training. Is that preferred by most or most preferred? Or are they one and the same in that instance?
It's kind of in the same way.
One and the same. Should we do active shooter training here?
Can't be a bad idea. So I said we'd have to.
Should we do that? Come on in. There seem to be a lot of shootings at schools.
Yeah.
There have been relatively few, actually, universities, although Virginia Tech seems to be the exception. Although all of the violence at Virginia Tech has not necessarily been shooting. There was one student who decapitated another student after an argument with a knife, which is actually rather hard to do. He decapitated her. It was a female student that had refused to go out with him, as I recall, and totally decapitated. So should we also have hand-to-hand combat training? How to disarm someone with a knife?
I wouldn't be against it.
Okay. All right. And then your third example was McDonald's fired their CEO after he admitted to an affair with a coworker. That's as a result of sexual harassment, right?
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about this, with regard to this, so we're following a policy that says don't have intimate relations with your employees. And I'm not suggesting that what he did was right, but historically, one of the things that becomes problematic with regard to this is that historically, how did people find their partner?
At the workplace.
What?
At the workplace.
Yeah, since about the 1960s, that's where a lot of people have found, because more and more, now before that, it wasn't, before about the 1960s when women, actually it may have been started earlier, when women started entering the workforce during World War II, you saw people finding their insignificant others in the workplace. because that's where you spend most of your time. It's sort of a natural place to find them. Before that, before women were in the workplace in huge numbers, where did you find them? At church. Yeah. You found them at church. That was where you historically found your partner. You know, at church. And then when women started entering the workforce, that became so. When we think about these policies and following the policies, and one of the things that we were talking about last time was the difference between procedural due process and substantive due process. We think that if we get the procedure correct, that we'll have good results. But there are unintended consequences. It's sort of a natural place. I mean, workplace sexual harassment is certainly an issue, but also it's a place where people naturally you have something in common with these people, don't you? And so it's sort of a natural place where people might find a partner or a life mate. So I think that's one of those things that you have to think about. So what do you have to fire them if they have an affair with that? Well, obviously the CEO, you can't separate them. So what do a lot of companies attempt to do in their policies with regard to workplace romance?
Just gotta like fill out a form or something like that.
Well, you have to both admit that this is a consensual. At some workplaces, they've started recognizing this. It was for a long time, just couldn't do it. Walmart, I think, was one of the first ones to come up with a policy. And basically what they said is you couldn't work in the same store. So if you started dating someone that was in the store, you could still work for Walmart, but one of you had to transfer. Could that be a big burden, though, on people? Before Walmarts were everywhere, let's suppose you're working at the Walmart in Guthrie, where I'm from, my little hometown, and you start dating a fellow coworker, and all of a sudden one of you has to transfer. Well, now you're looking at having to drive. I mean, in Edmond, that might not be a big deal, because how many Walmarts are there in Edmond? There are like 3, I think, aren't there, in Edmond alone? And there's even more if you go right, northwest Oklahoma City and stuff like that. But in Guthrie, that could be kind of a hardship. What if you're out in Sayre, Oklahoma? Anybody know where Sayre is? You're shaking your head. You know where Sayre is?
Yeah.
Well, how do you know where Sayre is?
Because I'm from Weatherford.
You're from Western Oklahoma, so you know where it is. Okay. All right. So if you're from Sayre, Oklahoma, that could be a real hardship, couldn't it? I mean, all of a sudden, I don't even know if they have a Walmart. So they have a Walmart in Weatherford. They have one in Clinton. They have one in Elk City. So let's say you're not in the Sayre, because they don't have one in Sayre. You're in Clinton. Is like does it go Weatherford, Clinton, Elk City?
Yeah,
Is
Clinton
that
doesn't even have Walmart either.
which one doesn't?
Clinton.
Clinton doesn't have one. Really? I thought they did. Okay. So if you had to transfer from Weatherford, where would you have to go?
In a dark room.
You'd have to go to Elk City or back to probably El Reno.
Yeah.
That could be a real hardship, couldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
How far is it from El Reno to
Both are about
or Weatherford?
45 minutes.
Yeah.
Different directions, but.
Okay. So I think there's something nice about following policies, but you also have to recognize that for every policy, you can run into unintended consequences. We don't want to have sexual harassment in the workplace, but it's sort of natural when people spend a lot of time together that they might form mutual attractions. And that's certainly a healthier place to meet a partner than at a bar, right? If you meet them in a bar, you ought not be surprised that they like to drink. So, not a lot of people go to church. The number of people, church attendance is declining. People go to church now. Among your generation, the biggest denomination among your generation are the nuns. And by nuns, we don't mean the women in white habits. They mean when they ask you what your religious affiliation is, you say none of the above, right? So, it's decreasing. All right, good job. I think we're on a good path here. So which group is going to go next? You guys want to go next? Good job.
Sure.
so let me start another. Today is the 23rd, right? Of January.
And so,
All right, so this group is
this is the enlightened.
the enlightened. All right, so what is your definition? What is justice?
So originally we had a route of legal action, but I kind of figured that was too concrete. Maybe it's not flexible enough. And so we ended up changing it to it's a moral route of action, typically kind of influenced by legality.
So it's what now?
It's a moral route of action, typically influenced by legality.
Okay. Influenced by legal. All right.
And then our second piece of, which was what does justice have to do with marketing? And we wrote that marketing and justice are interrelated in numerous ways. Some of these ways include truthful branding, quality of operations, and transparency. Truthful branding is recommended because businesses should ensure that customers understand what they're purchasing. Next, equality of operations is important to maintain an equal routine for all participants. And lastly, transparency aids and to protect businesses from being involved in shady practices. So our first example of truthful branding would be the Fire Festival. I'm not sure if y'all were familiar, but a couple years ago, there was this big kind of advertising push for this thing called the Fire Festival. It was going to have a bunch of entertainers, famous people, etc. It turns out that it was kind of a big disappointment, and so the customers that were intending to attend showed up to more or less boxed lunches and big kind of tents. I'm not sure the exact details, but disappointing to say the least. Our next one was equality of operations. So just kind of I guess not simplistic, but immediate example, employees equally kind of across the board, where no one is really treated in a higher stance than one guy or another. Then our last one is transparency, and we wrote Zappos owes access to vendors. This one should be just kind of obvious. You kind of know where Zappos gets their goods from.
Okay. All right. So you've got morality is not necessarily a policy or a legal standard, but it is somehow influenced by the law. I think that's important because there are lots of things that we say are wrong that are not necessarily criminal, although they may have legal import. And then there are things that both are criminal and civil, and we think that those have moral import as well. So an example would be of something that has it's influenced by the law, and I think we think it has moral import, but it may not rise to the level of criminal activity, is in the field of civil law and tort. There's something called defamation of character, and it comes in two forms, libel and slander, right? And one is the written defamation of an individual, and the other is verbal. But even within that, there's lots of stuff I could do to you that might harm you, that doesn't even rise to the level of a legal cause of action. So let's suppose I see you going into a business and you've had my marketing ethics class and you didn't do particularly well in my marketing ethics class. And so I go into the business and I say, I just noticed Mr. or Ms. So-and-so coming in here. Are they applying for a job? And they say, why, yes. And I say, well, before you hire them, you should know that I was their professor at the University of Central Oklahoma. And they were dumb as the day is long. every single time they opened their mouth, they subtracted from the sum total of human knowledge. We thought we would have to pot them in the earth and turn them towards the sun and water them if they got any stupider. Can you sue me?
I wanna
Under
say,
libel or slander, under defamation of character?
well, no,
No,
because it's
'cause-
subjective. And I think there has to be a certain degree where, because I mean, law is kind of like that if it's not. And it also has to be, I mean, technically it could be untruthful, but it has to be to like a certain severity, if I recall correctly.
Okay, so what you've got there is everything I've said, you're dumb as the day is long. Well, what does that mean? You're right, it's extremely subjective. How do you measure that? Dumb as the day is long. Well, actually, how long is a day? 24 hours. Is that really all that long a period? I mean, maybe you're really pretty smart because the day's not really that long. Day's pretty short. If you think about time in relation to the history of the earth, or even in relation to our time here on the earth, right? I mean, Homo sapiens have been on the planet. I don't know. I'm not a evolutionary biologist, but a relatively long period of time compared to a day, right? So dumb as the day is long. Thought we would have to water them. You know, I mean, that's all a matter of opinion. Now, if you don't get the job because that employer thinks, well, this is somebody who ought to know, they're a college professor, have you been harmed?
Sort of in a way, not physically.
Yeah, you've been harmed. You didn't get the job.
Well, I mean, if I, let's say,
That's an economic harm,
I know,
right? Let's change the fact pattern just slightly. What if I said they are a known felon? Could you sue me? Well, actually, I'm going to tell you, you could sue me under the other. You're not going to win under the other one because as you pointed out, everything I've said is subjective, right? I mean, dumb or lack of intelligence is a continuum, right? I mean, there's really smart for a canine, right? I mean, like some breeds of canine are smarter than other breeds of canine.
Yeah.
I've had all kinds of canines in my life, all kinds of dogs, from really dumb ones to really pretty bright ones. Shih Tzus, one of my favorite breeds, are really dumb. Their whole job is to just love you, but they're stupid. And they're just dumb dogs. They just kind of sit there and look at you with those big dopey eyes. You know, they don't do anything. Other dogs seem to be more intelligent. They can do more things. They can be trained to find people and rubble, right? So I mean, it's a continuum of intelligence. But now, so you can sue me, but you're going to have a hard time winning, even though you can prove damages. But if I say you're a convicted felon, you're a known felon. Well, now you've suffered damages, and there is something objectively that we can look at, right? We can look at your criminal history, and if you've not been convicted of something, that's an objective fact. That's reality. We can say, you know, no, I've never been convicted. You cost me a job. That cost me money and lost potential earnings. And so you could sue me. Both have harmed you, but one is not going to get your recovery and the other is. Is that fair? If you didn't get the job, let's suppose it's your dream job. If you didn't get the job, is that fair?
From kind of a objective standpoint, no, because one is you get to say kind of what you want and you have the same effect versus if you say something else and you still don't get the job, well, the other one kind of harms both parties, whereas one kind of just harms one. So instead of, I guess, in biology terms, it's not mutually beneficial. Instead, one's a parasite, the other one's mutually beneficial, but it's a loss-loss.
Okay. Let's talk about your examples, truth and branding. So the fire festival. What is truth and branding?
Truthful branding. So ensuring that you're kind of not lying about your product.
Okay.
Which obviously false advertising is illegal. That is more or less, I guess, where that one was aiming towards.
Okay, and we've seen examples in recent history of false advertising being used and companies being held. So one of the things that happened recently, and you all probably don't even remember this because it in terms of your time spatial orientation, it probably seems like a lifetime ago, but I think it was about 5 years ago. Volkswagen has this, they come out with this diesel Volkswagen, right? And they claim that it gets 30 miles to the gallon, and on average, 30 miles to the gallon. And it turns out that they started doing some tests, some independent testing agencies, some independent evaluators did some tests, and the cars never got anywhere near 30 miles to the gallon. And it turns out Volkswagen, as I recall, was in order to fake the data, they were manipulating. So cars now have lots of computers in them, and they were manipulating the computer software to show that it was getting better gas mileage, better fuel mileage than it actually was. That was bad. They were lying to consumers. And so they were held accountable. I mean, a whole lot of people sued them and were able to recover because they had told people that they had these wonderful cars. But what about Tesla? These are supposed to be really, and I mean, obviously there's no miles to the gallon in Tesla, right? But they're supposed to be really, really wonderful, environmentally friendly cars. One of my friends has one. I got to ride in it for the first time about 3 weeks ago. And apparently the seats are organic pleather, right? So like the Nagas that died for these seats. So they're made out of organic plant-based materials, but they feel like leather. It's a really interesting car. It's got a karaoke feature, which I love. So, and you can he can just take his hands off and sing karaoke, and it's playing, because the car basically drives itself within a certain
Does he have
set
on
of
job on it?
yeah, he has the autopilot on it. So it's pretty interesting car. They're marketing it as being this this environmental wonder. Is it?
I don't know too much about Tesla, so I would have to.
Like mining the, materials for the batteries. and
The
stuff.
rare earth minerals that are used, that
Yeah, it's bad for the environment.
yeah. And what are we gonna? I mean, right now it seems great because nobody's chunking out all the. But if everybody starts going to an electric car, what are we gonna do with all these? I mean, batteries eventually wear out, and Tesla's answer to that is, well, we refurbish the batteries. You still have waste, right, from that process. Is that really environmentally sound? We don't know. So what about the foreseeability in branding? Is that an issue?
What do you refer to as in the foreseeability?
Well, I mean, by all outward appearances right now, it seems like these are great environmental steps forward. But
Until we have a larger.
until we really know. Now, one of the things that's sort of ridiculous, the president is claiming that windmills are horrible. right? I mean, he's come out with this anti-wind campaign. By all, and he claims that there are just dead birds all over the place where there are windmills. That the windmills are just killing the birds. There's just thousands. If you go to a windmill, you're just going to find the bald eagle just dead at the base of the windmill. They do kill some birds, but lots of other things kill birds too. You know what are more dangerous? Skyscrapers with the reflective windows kill more birds. And if you've ever been in if you've ever worked in a skyscraper, you'll hear birds just constantly with like the Devon Tower that's got those windows that they can't quite see, and bam, you'll hear it all day long. Turns out those kill a lot of birds. Power lines kill a lot of birds, right? But I don't know. Do we know what's the overall impact? I mean, it seems like the windmills are a better way of generating electricity than some of the other stuff. It seems like Tesla. I mean, but do we know, are we completely aware of the entire effects of those yet? No. Would we hold somebody responsible for something that they couldn't have reasonably foreseen?
Is this kind of like the whole vaping thing? They don't have enough data on it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So like they came out with this whole idea of let's get people off of cigarettes, vaping. This seems to be this like the thing that's really dangerous about cigarettes is not really the nicotine. It's the what? It's the tar in the smoke that causes, the carcinogens. At least medicine is not really a science. Medicine is an art. Because there's so many variables that you can't control. It's hard to control. But, so they came out with these e-cigarettes, and they seem to be a lot better for people than actual cigarettes, or at least in theory they should be, but are they?
No. You're still inhaling smoke. I mean.
Well, you're inhaling something.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that's happening is it's causing not necessarily tar or black, sort of black lung. It's not black lung, but tar in your lungs. But it is causing, like, I think one of the things that they're saying is that the vape causes popcorn lung. So, but I mean, was that truthful branding at the time? Like, this is a better alternative?
Didn't really have enough data.
Yeah, they didn't have enough research on it.
Yeah.
So I guess in that sense, no, technically no.
So how do you ever know when you're telling the truth with regard to branding? And your example was the Fire Festival, and what about the Fire Festival was?
So the Fire Festival was going to be this big event where famous people such as like Beyonce, a bunch of others that I don't know but they also were going to have like gourmet chefs, et cetera, et cetera. And it turns out when the participants arrived on the beach, it was kind of barren, it was trashy. They were set up in like little white tents, and they were handed kind of styrofoam box lunches. I'm not sure if any entertainers actually arrived to actually participate in the event, but there was a big kind of Instagram movement where people kind of with a lot of followers, more or less, they would post these kind of just orange boxes, and that was their advertising method. It was just, let's get this orange box as far as it can go. But of course, the event was not as what they proclaimed it to be.
Okay. What if, the best of their intention and it just didn't happen? Should we hold them morally culpable for that?
Well, yes, that's what they advertised.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so that's a clear example.
That's a clear
Yeah.
example. However, referring back to our like vaping per se, perhaps we shouldn't hold them in too high a regard. However, I think they should be held accountable, as they did not have the sufficient evidence to support that perhaps e-cigarettes were less deadly, or whatever you want to use in terms of describing it, than cigarettes. Because I believe there is a vast difference in terms of, let's say, medical health versus an event. The event, of course, you kind of can or cannot follow through, versus something in medicine kind of needs the research and backing up.
Okay, so it seems that one is more objectively reasonable or unreasonable than the other.
Mhm.
Okay. And then your third example was open access to Zappos. Okay, so tell me about that.
So I did a little bit of research prior to the class because I wanted something for transparency. And so I just Googled top 10 transparent companies. One listed was Zappos. And according to, I believe it was a Business Insider, Zappos has open access to all their vendors. So I assume there's a location where you can just go in and find where Zappos purchases all of their stuff and so forth and whom they do business with. So you kind of know where they get their products from. In counterpart, let's say to an example like Nestle, where they kind of, I believe they are in Taiwan and they take advantage of the laws there, such as child labor and so forth, which some people find to be wrong, for a lack of a better word. But of course, from my point of view, I think the laws kind of need to be based upon where one is. So I don't think we should be able to judge places like Taiwan and compare it to kind of ours, but I'm sort of in the minority in that regard.
Well, and of course, countries like that, China, for example, which manufactures a lot of stuff that used to be manufactured in the United States, would point out that at one point in time we had rampant child labor problems in this country. We didn't insist that children go to school. That's a relatively modern phenomenon. This idea of children going to school, and to this day we still have vestiges of the fact that we relied heavily in our culture on child labor in this country. And what's that big vestige called? It's called summer break. Why do we have summer break in school? Is that a really wonderful thing? Well, educators think, although they don't have, in primary and secondary education, they don't have really good data, but they do think, because they don't really understand how to set up experiments and designs and stuff like that. But it does seem, and it makes sense, it's got good facial validity, that students lose a lot of the knowledge that they've gained over the summer. So you go to school, you learn, math, and then you have this 3-month period off, and you're going to lose some of that. And so when you come back, they have to go back through trying to re-educate you, get you, like a little review period. And so there's an argument that, school ought to be year round so that students retain this knowledge. Why is it that we have summer break in this country? Well, it's a vestige of the fact that kids were needed. They were economic assets for their parents, and they were needed to go work in the farm. And when do you need to work people in the farm? Well, you need to work them in the summer when you have to plant and then harvest. And so that's why we have a 3-month break in the summer. It's a product of that time period when we relied heavily on child labor to support families. So even though we recognize that children should be going to school, there was this recognition that they still were an economic asset. Now, we've totally moved away from that. How many of you grew up on a farm? Probably none. By farm, I mean like a actual money-making endeavor. No. So
Makeshift farm.
So you have what?
Makeshift farm.
I put cattle, a bunch of cows.
Okay, so I actually grew up on a farm where my family made money, or part of my family did. My parents were divorced, so my father actually runs cattle, and he actually makes money off of it. So, but that's a rarity in this day and age. Most people live in the city, and so shouldn't kids be in school all year long? Probably be better for their parents if they were. Okay, so we've got this idea of sourcing products and open source so that you can figure out where they get their products from, so you can understand where their supply chain is. And as opposed to Nestle, which obscures their supply chain.
Yeah, I mean, you could say the same thing with Nike. I don't think they have open access to kind of where their products are produced. However, I think the majority of it is, of course, in China.
Uh-huh. So with regard to Zappos, are they publicly traded?
I don't believe they are.
Are they privately held?
Let's find out.
Good idea. Let's look it up and see if they're publicly traded.
Nope, they were purchased by Amazon.
They were what?
They were
Purchased by Amazon.
They were purchased by Amazon. Is Amazon publicly traded? Amazon is publicly traded. Yeah, Amazon is publicly traded. So
$2,000 a share. Oh my God.
how much is it
$2,000 a share.
for Amazon?
The exact is it's 1876.44.
Well, that's not very much. That's not very much money. Look up Berkshire Hathaway Class A share.
What?
Berkshire Hathaway Class A. It should be about $124,000 a share right now.
Berkshire?
It should be BRK-A, I think.
Oh man. Okay, so it's a little over 342K.
Oh, I was wrong. Berkshire Class A shares. So Amazon is just a tawdry bargain basement prices there. In
Although they're down $2,000.
okay, so now the reason I bring this up is because I'm pretty sure Nestle is publicly traded, or they're part of a group that's publicly
I
traded.
think it's Midco International.
If you allow people access to your supply chain, they can figure out a whole lot about your business model, can't they? So maybe you want to not tell people what your supply chain is, because
I mean, in a business sense, yes, but I think in this day and age, especially our generation, we kind of like the open transparency. We're about the causes. So maybe Zappos isn't purchasing their things from places like Taiwan, where we maybe don't agree with their kind of child labor activities. So
yeah, okay.
in a way,
But again, going back to your example on branding
Mhm.
and truth in branding. So you go to the store now and there are aisles and aisles and aisles of stuff that is, branded as organic, or eggs that are by free range chickens. And you have this idea in your head that these chickens are happy and living out in a bucolic environment, running free and in a state of nature, right? They're just happy chickens scratching the ground, running free on the prairies of Oklahoma. No, that's not what's happening, right? Like the chickens are still primarily in a big hen house, and they throw the barn door open, and amazingly, because they've never been raised outside, they don't run outside. Now, they're not kept in a, crate, so to speak, but this idea that you've got these free range chickens out there, scratching the ground and eating grubs, and running around in the sunshine and having just the ultimate chicken life, is just, it's pure hokum, isn't it?
for the most part.
Yeah, pretty much. So, your generation wants this transparency, but do they really take the time to educate themselves? How many of you would have thought that free range eggs meant that they were outside before? None of you? Oh, well, you're smarter than the average. Most of my classes are like, what? The chickens aren't out? No, they're not outside. That's not the way it works. All right, so good examples. I think we're getting somewhere with this. We've got one more group, right? All right, good deal. Our last group. And what was your group name?
Loyalty brand?
The loyalty brand? All right. And so what is justice?
We wrote down that justice is a rightness or correctness and it's a sense of order.
Okay, a sense of order. All right. And what does it have to do with marketing?
In marketing, we said that it's kind of delivering what people want, how they want, when they want, the price they want, all that. Kind of doing what the customer wants.
Okay. All right, so you've got this idea of distributive justice, I guess. Don't let me put words in your mouth, but is that what you're saying? Is that it relates to marketing in terms of distributive justice?
I think
Giving
so.
people their, what we might call the desserts theory of justice,
Yeah.
giving them what they deserve, their due.
I mean, deserves a strong word, but yeah, what they want, what they're paying for.
Okay. Well, shouldn't you give them what they, I mean, what they're paying for, what they want and what they deserve? I mean, if they're paying for it, don't they deserve to get what you say you're giving them?
Yeah, I guess that's true.
You shouldn't tell them they're getting something other than what they're paying for. If you're paying for, one of the things that's problematic, for example, is there are all of these people, and now they're forced to, in their advertising, say, we don't make any claim that this cures any disease, right? Because everybody thinks that they've got some secret to success in terms of health and longevity. Just take more vitamin C, and it will, increase your immune system. And they tell you that, and then at the end they say, but we're not making any claims that this treats, cures, prevents any disease. Well, if you say it's boosting the immune system, aren't you saying, emergency? How many of you have taken that? How many of you have gotten that? And, is it effective?
Probably
I don't know. Makes you feel better. There's a lot of evidence that the placebo effect works. What's the placebo effect?
It's something that psychologically you think it's doing something, but it's not.
Yeah,
it's like a
so it
spoonful of
works.
Sugar.
Yeah, I give you a sugar pill and tell you you're getting better, and you seem to get better. It does. There's some evidence to that does work. So giving people what they want. All right. So what are your examples?
Firstly, Amazon offers millions of products shipped directly to customers.
Okay, so you're gonna have to speak up. So the microphone can pick it up, and so that I can hear it because I'm deaf in one ear. So what was it?
Amazon
Amazon. Okay.
offers millions of products shipped directly to customers.
Okay.
The target for people who are too good for Walmart has more upscale going to those stores.
Okay.
And Starbucks, each order is custom, caters to the customer, created for them individually.
Okay. Starbucks caters to the customer. Okay. I hate Starbucks, by the way. They're the tool of the devil. And I tell students on sales trips, if you even mention the word Starbucks, I will punch you in the throat. So, do not talk to me about Starbucks. But we'll go with your examples since you were caught unaware. And what was your third one?
Third one was Starbucks.
The third one was, what was the second one?
Target.
Target. Okay, what was it with Target that you said?
It's more of an upscale Walmart. basically.
Upscale, and that's giving people what they want because people want a more pleasant shopping experience than Walmart.
Yeah, Walmart's kind of depressing.
It's depressing. I admit, I'm like a man going to the gallows when I have to go to Walmart. It's a horrible experience. I have found evidence that the Yeti exists, and they're in the Guthrie Walmart, and they're constantly in front of me with their Yeti children. Why is it that you have to bring all 12 of your kids to Walmart with you? I mean, leave them at home, and they're constantly touching stuff, and they're running noses and spreading disease. And it's a sad thing, but you still, when you run out of toothpaste, you got, and we don't have a Target in Guthrie. So I pretty much am forced to have to go to Walmart. There's some stuff that you have to get. So Amazon, products to customers. Now let's think about this. Yeah, they're creating a lot of value there, but at what cost? Is Amazon a great company to work for?
No.
No,
No.
they're a horrible. In order to get those products to you, so they have these people that have to pull the products, right, and get them in the boxes and shipped out. Because they get fired, they do an automatic, as I understand it, They do an automatic, if you're below a certain percent, you're fired. It's, like if you drop below the quota, and the quota increases. When you first start out, it's manageable, but the idea is that you're supposed to learn how the system works and get better. And so you have actual examples I read in one article of employees, because they can't take time to go to the bathroom, they're urinating in Coke bottles because they don't want to get fired. Now, there seem to be a multitude of problems here with that, not the least of which is that it's pretty degrading to an employee to be forced into that kind of, you can't go to the bathroom. And next, I'm thinking that like this is a sanitary issue, right? Like I'm like this this doesn't seem to be the place that you should, maybe I'm wrong, but like that would seem to be to raise all kinds of issues. So yeah, we're getting the products we want by a company that is really not treating their employees well. But it's sort of like Walmart. I mean, Amazon is the new Walmart. What was Walmart's model? We're going to sell it cheap. We're going to sell it cheaper at a lower price than anybody else. How do you get that? Well, you really skimp on your labor costs, right? How do you skimp on labor? Well, you don't pay people a whole lot. You don't pay them necessarily a living wage. So is that a good thing?
No, not great.
But they are giving people what they want.
Yeah.
Okay. What about Starbucks? Let's go to your Starbucks. And again, Starbucks is the tool of the devil, but we'll go with your example. What was it about Starbucks that you like?
They custom create orders for people.
Okay.
So whatever kind of crazy thing you want when you go there, they'll make it for you.
Okay, yeah. It's what we call value co-creation in marketing. So there's this idea in marketing that what we should do is we should work with our customers to create value. And so there are lots of ways that we do this. And we even engage in now what's called mass customization of products. And Dell was like one of the first to do this. So if you wanted a Dell computer, you didn't go to the store and buy a Dell, you called Dell and they mass customized it and sent it out to you very quickly and very efficiently. And that's great. And Starbucks, yes, they do that. They cater to the customer's wants and needs. The reason I hate Starbucks is because when they first got started, the way they operated in their business model required, and some of this came out in documents from the company, was they serve really crappy coffee. Their coffee is consistently rated as some of the worst coffee. Who consistently beats Starbucks coffee by objective independent taste testers who know about coffee? Dunkin' Donuts. I love Dunkin' Donuts. Right, so we go to a lot of Dunkin' Donuts, not because I love the donuts are horrible, but their coffee is the bomb.
Bad.
Huh?
The donuts, they're that
The
bad.
donuts there are horrible.
The donuts are not good,
They're horrible.
but their coffee is. Their coffee is
Go to like a
really good.
privately owned donut shop and you will never
like
go
it.
back to a Dunkin' Donuts.
I don't even think Krispy Kremes are
Yeah,
are
I don't
that
like
good.
Krispy
The Krispy Kremes are really good for about 5 seconds when they come right off, but
Yeah.
Yeah,
But-
when the sun's on.
yeah, when the sign's on, that's when they're. But Starbucks, yes, they do. So they have deliberately sold really crappy coffee so that people would buy a latte, or they would buy the mocha, or is that manipulative? Yeah, they're giving customers what they want or what they think they want, but in some respects, they're manipulating that person into doing what they want, which is something that we call nudging. Now, we nudge people all the time, and maybe for the better, although it violates autonomy of the individual by doing that, by nudging them. But we do things like to nudge them all the time to try to get them to do things that we want them to do. And a lot of ethicists would argue that that's a good thing, right? So there was a marketing researcher called Brian Wansink, who was at Cornell, who did all of these studies on food and branding at the Food and Branding Lab. And what he suggested was, and his research was actually implemented across, and it was even implemented in places like UCO. Here we are at the Harvard of the Hills, the Princeton of the Plains, the Stanford of the Sticks, the Oxford of the Oaks, the Berkeley of the Blackjacks, the Yale of the Yahoos. And what Brian Wansink said was, if you want to get people to be healthier, you need to nudge them into eating less, right? And so he even wrote a book called Mindless Eating. Now, it turns out that Dr. Wansink, and one of his students was actually one of my professors who I hated in the doctoral program. Turns out he was manipulating the data, and all of his research has been withdrawn. And he had these huge NIH grants to do this. And like I said, it had real public policy impact because what they were doing. So when his research became really big, I noticed that Buddy's, which is our cafeteria here on campus, which is now gone. They've taken Buddy's out. I think they're redoing it and doing something else over there. But we have this cafeteria. If you're on a meal plan, you went over to Buddy's, and that was one of the places that you could be on the meal plan. Well, historically in a cafeteria, what did they give you? They gave you a tray, right? And you went through the line and you loaded up that tray. And Brian Wansink said, well, if we take away the tray, what will happen? People will eat less because it nudges them. It becomes less convenient. We're not telling you, we're not specifically out and out saying you have to eat fewer calories. But if we give you a tray, you load up and it makes sense, right? I mean, I don't think this should be shocking to anybody. You put more food on the tray. Whereas if you don't have a tray, what do you get? How much can you carry? You can carry one plate and a drink at a time without having to go back. And if you eat, and we do know this, it takes the mind a little bit of time to figure out that you're full. So if you eat and then you have to get up and go back, you're less likely to eat as much. At least that's the theory, right? The other thing that he said was give people smaller plates, right? And this became a big thing. So the cafeterias started doing this. Again, rather than having a tray and rather having big 10-inch or 12-inch dinner plates, they started using 8-inch plates. And what does that do? You think that the plate is fuller than it is. And so maybe you'll eat less. Now, it turns out, again, a lot of his research was fundamentally flawed. But that's nudging, and that's one of the things that Starbucks does. So we think that we're being catered to when in fact we've been nudged into thinking that we need to have the custom coffee, right? Like the pumpkin spice mocha frappuccino latte with caramel and cream, right? I mean, and is that, I don't know. I mean, are they really being all that ethical? Target, upscale Walmart. I guess I have less problems with Target because they just seem to be, a fairly, I mean, they are the anti-Walmart. Now, how long can they sustain that model in the face of Amazon, which is cheaper and probably easier, more convenient for people? I don't know. There are still some things that people want to go buy, right? All right, good job. So I think we're on the road here. Round of applause for all the groups. Everybody's gone, right? So let's talk about this. Since we've gotten a good start here, let's see if we can flesh out some more ideas on what is justice and marketing. And I will tell you that this is the part of the class. This is my favorite class to teach. Of everything that I teach, it's my favorite class to teach. It's the one that students like the least. And this part of the class is the part that students like the least because as business students, I think we operate in many respects we want concrete answers to things. And often in ethics, it seems that there are more questions than there are answers. But hopefully, welcome to Marketing Ethics Online. The chapter begins with Welcome to. That's my ADA compliant for visually impaired. So one of the cases that is in all of the marketing ethics textbook is Enron. I don't know if it's in the latest edition on the first chapter because they put it in different chapters depending on the edition that you have. And you can use any of the chapters that you want for this class. I mean, you can use any of the editions of the textbooks that you want, so you don't have to get the, you don't necessarily have to get the most recent edition. So you can buy, one of the things I try to do in this class is come up with really cheap text, and you can buy the Jordan's book. You can find it really, really cheaply on Biblio or some of those other things. But we all know about this case. Enron was one of these remarkable companies that seemed to be just going great guns. Then all of a sudden, it turns out that they were engaged in what was kind of a classic Ponzi scheme, and that they were creating what were called special project entities. They were creating these special project entities, and they filed for bankruptcy protection, and their shareholders lost everything. People who were millionaires all of a sudden, in the course of a matter of months, went from being millionaires to having absolutely no money, right, in their 401ks and going bankrupt. I don't think Enron, by the way, and it's like I said, it's talked about in all of the text. I don't know which chapter it's in the version that you have. It used to be in the first chapter. I don't think Enron's actually that interesting of a case from an ethical standpoint, because I think it's sort of a duh case. I think anybody who has the ethical sensitivity of a banana slug could figure out that probably you shouldn't be doing this. The cases that I actually think are more interesting in terms of marketing ethics and our view of justice and what is justice and marketing are cases like, I don't know, bars that have drink specials. Is that ethical? Having a happy hour?
Depends on your point of view. For the business, sure.
Okay.
Some more drinks, that's kind of the point of a business, is to make money, bring in customers. But I mean, you could argue that potentially maybe one of the customers an alcoholic that takes advantage of it.
Right.
Kind of the thing.
And they're not supposed to do that, by the way. You could be sued and you could be held liable if people go out, if they leave your bar dead drunk and they go out and get in an accident. Now, it happens every day. There haven't been a whole lot of people that have been held civilly liable, but it does happen. I think those are more interesting cases to talk about. Things like, should bars have happy hours? Should we legalize medical marijuana? Should we have recreational marijuana? That's, I think that's a more interesting case than the Enron cases. But all of these cases illustrate the idea that justice in marketing is an important thing to study because there are so many ethical failures in business. And it impacts everyone when this happens. When Enron went bankrupt, it not only affected their shareholders and their 401k, but it had impact on the stock market as a whole, on everybody then who had investments in retirement plans suffered, at least during that period of time. And there was a series of them. It wasn't just Enron, it was WorldCom and Tyco and all of these others. And so I think that the cases do illustrate, even though I don't think that these are terribly interesting because I think they're pretty dull cases, the idea that ethics and marketing are intimately tied. Now, when I first started wanting to teach this course, I asked the dean years and years and years ago, and at that time, I believe the dean was Mike Shirley. And I said, I'd really like to teach a class in ethics. And he said, no, our students need substantive skills. They don't need this ethics stuff. They need to be able to understand double entry accounting, finance, and they have a hard time understanding this. We need substantive skills. We need things like sales classes, right? Because that's a skill set that you can learn and develop and go out and actually get a job with.
And ethics doesn't seem to be one of those things that's going to help you go out and get a job. It's hard to measure, it's hard to quantify, although I would argue that it's important. And then what happened was Enron, WorldCom, and Tyco happened, and all of a sudden AACSB, which we were trying to get at that time, we are now an AACSB school, started saying things like you need to step up the ethics and you need to have more emphasis in ethics. And there's two ways you can do that. And so all of a sudden he said, you know, that course you've been wanting to offer in ethics, why don't you offer it? And ultimately now in the Department of Marketing, we've decided that we have a specific course dedicated to marketing ethics. So why study marketing ethics when business has become increasingly complex and it seems like we need to have these substantive skills? And specialized courses in marketing seem to be more and more important. Things like actual sales classes that teach you how to go out and sell something. And most of you are going to have to go out and be in a sales role. Everybody sells something. And so shouldn't you know what it is that leads to greater success in sales as opposed to sort of using the older model? Well, one of the things that I would argue with regard to that is, for example, in sales, which is, I'm one of the sales professors, and so I'm interested in sales, is that one of the things that we saw is that in the old model of selling, which was really a pyramid model where you had, you know, the approach, the needs identification, the presentation, and then closing was the vast majority of the time that you spent in a sale. It was close, long, and hard. This older model might be associated with what we call the ADA model, the awareness, interest, desire, action model of selling. Now, because what happened is people bought stuff and then they had buyer's remorse in many of those instances under that older model of selling. We now have flipped the pyramid and we spend far more time on the approach and needs identification part, right? So the planning, needs ID has become a bigger part, and closing has become a smaller part, because what we really want to do is figure out what it is that people want and need as opposed to what we want to sell them. And this has ethical import. That older model led to a lot of ethical failures because we were selling these mass-produced goods, and it was just get the sale, get out, and move on. And we still see people using this model, but customers were unhappy. And ultimately, what happens to those businesses that sell products that people don't really want and need? That they just, you know, they make a pitch, they get your attention, they sell you the product, you're unhappy with it. Well, what happens to those products ultimately? You see this a lot. I mean, QVC is basically the old model of sales. It's people surfing the television late at night that are bored, and that it's impulse buying, and then they have impulse regret. Let's take a look at a commercial if they still have it up on the web. I can find it.
On lazy days when it's chilly, turning up the heat costs money, and wrestling with blankets is silly. This one's too big, that one's too small, and a blanket can't cover it all. If you want to stay warm, you need Forever Lazy, the one-piece, lie-around, lounge-around, full-body lazy wear that covers you from head to toe in soft, warm fleece. Just slip it in, zip it, and get lazy. Now you're toasty warm from head to toe, and your hands and feet stay free, so you can talk on the phone, enjoy a good book, do homework, or just do nothing at all. Forever Lazy is made of ultra-soft, breathable fleece, and it's oversized for that baggy, comfortable, lazy day, perfect pajama feeling you love. Party it up with friends, or enjoy some downtime with pets, and do it all while staying warm, comfortable, and lazy. Forever Lazy comes in 4 stylish colors in sizes that fit everyone in the family, so you can all watch the big game together while Dad does what he does best. Whether you're raiding the fridge during a commercial break or cramming for a college exam, Forever Lazy keeps you comfy cozy. With a drawstring hoodie to keep the chilly weather away, Forever Lazy is the best way to stay warm outdoors. It will be the talk of your next tailgate, and you'll stay warm and comfortable through the entire game. Uh-oh, gotta go? No worries. Forever Lazy has zippered hatches in front and back for great escapes when duty calls. And now Forever Lazy in any size is just $19.95. But wait, call now and we'll also include the fleece footies to keep your toes toasty warm. The footies are a $10 value, but they're yours free. Order now and we'll send you the Forever Lazy inflatable neck pillow, great for home, travel, or just being lazy. It's a $10 value, but it's yours free. Just pay processing and handling. You get the Forever Lazy, the footies, and the neck pillow, all for just $19.95. Here's how to order.
All right, so the only thing that they didn't suggest that the Forever Lazy was for that formal dinner party, that black tie event that but like, I guarantee you, if you show up at the tailgate, for a football game, in that, you need to be arrested. Right? And you're probably going to be arrested. Like, what's the perv doing? And that's just, it's insane. So this is, like, we're going to capture your interest. This is like perfect for it. There's no product differentiation there. It's just like, everybody needs this, don't they? No, you really don't need this. And so we really need to, think about this and think about, and I'm not saying that Forever Lazy is an unethical company, other than, it's one of these things where we make a pitch. It doesn't cost a whole lot, or it doesn't seem to cost a whole lot, but it's for these people that are watching QVC. I think it was actually featured on QVC, and that's how they got started, Lori Grenier or something like that. And, people are just wasting their money. It's creating, and this has actually become used in a criminal defense. Stuff like this is creating a condition that philosophers call affluenza, where we're buying stuff like this that we don't really need. Does anybody need this product?
Probably not.
Does anybody really want this product?
Probably not.
I like it kind of.
You like it kind of?
Yeah, I mean,
you
I'm
like the
wired.
onesie?
Yeah, it's not bad. It has that little slit in the back too. I like that.
Okay. You all probably don't know who Gene Simmons is, do you? Yeah, the rock god. Gene Simmons likes onesies, apparently. So you wouldn't think that, but yeah, he apparently likes onesie pajamas. This idea that philosophers have come up with, this idea that we're just spending money on things like this, and this is one of those things. Like I said, people get bored. They're watching television. They see this commercial. They buy it, and really, if you were going out in this and going to the tailgating, I think we need to have you, evaluated for your psychological well-being. And as I've said, these philosophers have said that what we're doing is marketers have turned marketing on its head, and that we're no longer satisfying wants and needs, but rather we are creating irrational wants and needs through this kind of manipulation. Nobody needs things like this. I am a walking example of irrational wants and needs, right? I mean, I love clothes. I love jewelry. Irrational wants and needs, right? I mean, I love clothes. I love jewelry. I love shoes. And I spend copious amounts of money on all of these things. Should I spend that amount? I mean, should I be eyeballs with credit card debt and can't pay it off? We've got an entire industry now that's dedicated to telling you how you can get out of your credit card debt. If you have you've all heard the commercials. If you have more than $5,000 in credit card debt, you have the right to settle that debt at a fraction of the cost. But there's no such thing as a free lunch. And what happens if you settle that debt at a fraction of the cost?
Credit score?
Your credit score tanks. Which means what?
Can't get more than credit.
Yeah, now, well, it may not just be your credit card. You need a place to, and you may not be able to get a house. You have kids, you need a car. That requires credit. I guess you can go to buy here, pay here. But of course, they charge exorbitant interest rates at those lots. I have another friend whose family owns one of those on Britton Road. I think it's called Britton Auto, I think is what it is. It's the buy here, pay weekly. What's the interest rate for people? It's exorbitant, right? People pay, and they repossess a lot of cars. That's their model. They know that a lot of people are not going to be able to pay. They repossess. He said that he had one Cadillac that he had sold 15 times. It paid for itself. He bought it at an auction and paid for itself. Because it's the $500 down. $99 a week or whatever it was to pay for it. So I think studying this stuff and studying ethics and philosophical ethics in marketing is important because we do have an impact as marketers on the wider world. Now, I am not one of these, I will tell you, a lot of my colleagues who are studying, and for example, my dissertation chair, who is very interested in marketing ethics, thinks that most marketing is unethical, that most of the marketing that we do is unethical. I'm not one of these that believes that. I'm not one that believes that marketing is sort of inherently a priori, not inherently unethical, but how we utilize the tool, maybe. And so what courses like this are designed to do, in addition to those substantive courses where we teach you techniques to sell people stuff, to think about what you're doing and how you're selling. Is it ethical to engage in manipulation of a consumer? I would generally say it's not, but is it ethical to provide them with information and allow them to make autonomous choices? I think that is. There is a role for marketing in that. So I'm out of time. We'll finish this up on Tuesday, and then we'll probably move into the book on a rule book for arguments. And we will talk about the foundations of philosophical ethics.